Have you ever wondered why so many women after decades of marriage start to feel distant cold or even irritable toward the very man they once loved so deeply? Why the light in their eyes seems to fade over the years? Not because of age, but because of something deeper, something heavier. You might think, oh, it's just old couple stuff. But the truth is, what's happening inside these women is often far more serious than most people are willing to admit. Behind the quiet sighs, the eye rolls at dinner, or the silence on long car rides, there's usually a buildup of unspoken emotion, unmet needs, and a widening emotional gap that's been growing for years. This video isn't about blame. It's not about turning the husband into the bad guy or making the wife out to be the silent martyr. It's an honest conversation about a quiet yet common pattern in many long-term marriages, especially from the perspective of women. And here's the scary part: most men don't even realize it's happening. Not until one day they wake up and the woman lying next to them feels cold, distant, maybe even angry, and they have no idea why. But the truth is, those feelings didn't just show up overnight. They're the result of a slow unraveling. Missed moments, forgotten gestures, disappointments that were never voiced. And over time, all that emotional weight adds up until one day she looks around and realizes she's running on empty. So whether you're a husband feeling that shift, a wife quietly hurting, or just someone who wants to understand this stage of life on a deeper level, stay with us. Because what you're about to hear could be the key to healing a decades-old distance, or stopping it before it even begins. And here's the first reason, one you may have never even considered. Reason number one: emotional neglect. Quiet, but devastating. One of the most common reasons a wife starts to feel disconnected from her husband isn't because of something big or dramatic. In fact, it's usually the opposite. It comes from things so small, so subtle, that most husbands don't even realize it's happening. It's called emotional neglect. And no, it doesn't mean he's a bad guy, abusive, or unfaithful. Sometimes he's still physically there, still goes to work, still asks, "What do you want for dinner?" But what's missing is his emotional presence, the kind that truly matters to his wife. In the early years of marriage, many men do try. They listen. They notice how their wife is feeling. They remember the little things. But then life kicks in, kids, work, bills, routines. And slowly they switch into what I call maintenance mode. They're still around, still sharing the house, but they've stopped checking in, stopped noticing her expressions, stopped asking things like, "Are you really okay today?" And year after year, that emotional tank inside her runs dry quietly. By the time the kids are grown, careers slow down, and the house gets quiet, she suddenly has time to feel again. And that's when the painful questions show up. I've given so much. Does he even see me anymore? A 72-year-old woman named Linda once told me he's a good man. He never cheated, never hit me, never left. But he also hasn't asked me how I feel since 1994. That line hit me like a punch to the chest. It laid bare the real nature of emotional neglect. It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it can be absolutely devastating. The good news is, it's not too late to fix. But it takes awareness. A man has to learn how to show up again, not with grand gestures, but with small, consistent care. And a woman needs to feel safe enough to speak her truth. Because when a wife says, "You haven't really seen me in years," that's not a complaint. That's her final attempt to reconnect. And if you miss that moment, you're not just skipping a conversation. You might be losing the very bond that held you together in the first place. Reason number two: the resentment that builds after decades of carrying an unequal load. Here's something I hear over and over again from older women: "I'm not just tired. I'm tired of carrying everything alone." It doesn't come from one dramatic event. There's no big explosion. It's the slow burn of being drained over decades, doing too much for too long, with too little acknowledgement. If you look at the traditional marriage model from the 60s and 70s, there was this unspoken agreement: the husband earns the money and the wife does everything else. But what does everything else actually mean? Cooking, cleaning, raising the kids, taking care of aging parents, remembering birthdays and holidays, budgeting the household, managing emergencies, you name it. And even when women started working full-time jobs, those home responsibilities rarely shared evenly. So after 30 or 40 years, many women begin to feel used, not because of one action, but because they've spent a lifetime keeping everything running, while their husbands just helped out when they had time. The key word here is helped, Because when you say you're helping, you're implying it's not your job. If you truly co-own the responsibility, then it's not helping. It's simply doing your part. A woman named Karen, 68, once told me, "I don't hate my husband because he's a bad man. I hate the way I become invisible every time there's something that needs to get done. Sick kids, funeral plans, mortgage paperwork, I handled it all. And no one ever asked how I was holding up." That's not bitterness, that's exhaustion never recognized. And here's the dangerous part: that feeling doesn't just fade, it starts turning into a kind of emotional ledger. Every unwashed dish, every forgotten anniversary, every lazy what's for dinner becomes a quiet reminder that the scale was never balanced. Especially in retirement, when the pace of life slows down and there's more time to reflect, that imbalance becomes crystal clear. Tiredness turns into distance. Silence turns into sarcasm. And what used to be quiet endurance becomes cold stares and shut down conversations. But here's the truth: most men don't realize any of this is happening until someone finally says it out loud. Not because they're bad people, but because of habits, generational norms, and that subconscious thought of, well, she's good at it, so let her keep doing it. Change doesn't require guilt. It just takes recognition. Sometimes a simple sentence like, "I know I haven't said this enough, but I truly appreciate everything you've done for our family," can breathe new life into a marriage. Reason, number 3, the emotional disconnect that hits in the final chapters of life. One of the hardest truths many older women face is this: they no longer feel emotionally connected to the man they've spent their whole life with. And here's the part that hurts even more. It's not because he became distant, it's because he was never truly emotionally close in the first place. When they were younger, juggling work, kids, and social responsibilities, that lack of emotional connection could be pushed aside. Life was loud and fast, and there just wasn't time for deep conversations. But then one day, the kids are grown, careers wind down, the house goes quiet, and that emotional emptiness finally reveals itself, wide and echoing like a canyon between two people. A lot of women enter this stage of life craving something very simple. They don't just want a partner, they want a soul companion. They long for deep eye contact, conversations that don't need solutions, just presence. They want to be truly heard and seen, not just nodded at. Instead, they often find silence. A husband glued to the TV for hours. One-word answers to meaningful questions. Eyes that never look up from the newspaper, even when she's sitting across the table silently crying. That feeling, it's not loud. There's no fight. But it's a quiet kind of betrayal. I remember Alice, a 73-year-old woman, told me once, "When we first got married, he used to ask how I was feeling. He noticed when I was sad. Now, I could be crying over dinner and he wouldn't even lift his head from the soup." That sentence, so still and soft, captured the deepest kind of loneliness in a marriage, not the absence of physical presence, but the absence of emotional presence. What makes this even more heartbreaking is that many men don't realize they're doing it. They think silence equals peace, that if there's no argument, everything must be fine. But intimacy in marriage doesn't mean not fighting. It means still wanting to understand each other. And when a woman no longer feels heard, she doesn't just feel disappointed, she starts to question her worth. Am I boring? Am I asking for too much? Do I even matter anymore? And when those questions go unanswered, they start turning into resentment, then bitterness. The dinner table, once a place of warmth, becomes a battlefield of unspoken tension. Silence, once comfort, becomes unbearable distance. One woman once confided, "If the rest of my life is just sitting across from a man who won't even look at me, I'd rather be alone." So if you're a husband listening to this, please don't retreat into that silence. Start again. She doesn't need perfection. She just needs you to want to connect again. Ask her, "How have you been feeling lately?" and really listen. Because it's that steady, sincere effort, not some grand apology, that has the power to melt years of frost and distance. Reason, number 4, feeling unappreciated. After a lifetime of silent sacrifices, if there's one thing that quietly eats away at a woman's heart over the years, it's the feeling that all her sacrifices have been forgotten. You've probably heard stories like this: a wife who holds down the entire household, every meal, every bedtime routine, every sleepless night with a sick child, every birthday remembered for both sides of the family. She did it out of love. No one forced her. She did it because she believed that's what love means. But as life slows down, as the house grows quieter, a quiet question begins to form. Did anyone ever even notice? She watches her husband casually flip through the evening news and silently wonders, does he have any idea what I gave up so he could have this life? And when the answer in her heart is probably not, something inside her begins to quietly break. Here's the hard part. She doesn't need praise. She just wants to be seen. Sometimes all it would have taken was a simple, heartfelt, I couldn't have done this without you. But instead what she hears is, what's for dinner? Or, did you pay the electric bill yet? She's not just a wife. She's been a lifelong partner. But when she's treated like a convenient shadow, just there to keep things running, it cuts deep. Linda, 68, once told me, for 40 years I supported his career, raised 3 kids, ran the whole household. He never asked me what I wanted. And now we eat dinner in silence, and he doesn't even ask how my day went. I feel invisible. That word invisible stuck with me, because I've heard it more often than I care to admit. And what we need to understand is this: human beings have a basic emotional need to feel acknowledged, not rewarded, not applauded, just recognized. A look, a sentence, a moment of, I see what you've done. When that doesn't happen for too long, a woman enters a state of emotional burnout. Not just physical tiredness, but a kind of spiritual disorientation, like she never existed, like none of it mattered. The good news is this cycle can be broken, and it doesn't take grand gestures. Sometimes all it takes is one small, honest moment. I remember how you took care of my mom when she was sick. I'll never forget that. No flowers, no poetry, just sincerity, a genuine look, a quiet thank you, a memory revisited. That alone can be enough to warm a heart that's grown cold from years of silence. Reason number 5, when emotional freedom and the need for true companionship go unmet, something unexpected happens to a lot of women in their 60s, 70s, even into their 80s. For the first time in decades, they begin to look inward. The kids are grown. The career hustle is behind them. Aging parents are no longer in their care. And suddenly they have the space to ask a simple but deeply powerful question: what do I need now? And more often than not, the answer is real emotional connection. Not just sharing a roof, not just going through the motions, but real presence. They want to feel understood, genuinely cared for, talked to, not out of obligation, but out of love. They want conversations that matter, to be seen and heard and valued. And here's what's so interesting: many women at this stage develop a new kind of emotional independence. They're no longer afraid of being alone. In fact, many find peace in solitude, something they never experienced during all those hectic, selfless years. But that doesn't mean they want to be alone. They still want connection. They want to feel chosen again, not needed, but wanted. So when they turn to the man beside them and that connection is no longer there, there's this quiet ache that begins to grow. Not because he's done something wrong, but because he's stopped showing up in the way she now needs. Maybe he's become more withdrawn, more rigid. Maybe he no longer laughs with her like he used to. Sure, he still does the right things, takes out the trash, fixes the faucet, but somewhere along the way, he forgot how to look her in the eyes, to hold her hand, to ask, how are you really feeling today? And the relationship quietly shifts from a loving bond into simple coexistence. 2 people living side by side, but no longer walking side by side. The more emotionally aware a woman becomes, the less willing she is to simply exist in a marriage that no longer nourishes her spirit. She starts to wonder, is this really it? Do I want to live the rest of my life like this? I remember Teresa, 72, once said, my husband never cheated, never hit me, never yelled, but I still feel completely alone. That line stops you in your tracks, because loneliness doesn't always come from someone being physically absent. Sometimes the deepest loneliness comes when they're still right there, but no longer connected to you, no longer seeing you. And here's the truth: most men don't mean to hurt their wives. A lot of them grew up in a generation where emotional expression was never taught, or worse, seen as weakness. They were taught how to provide, not how to be a partner. So even when they do love their wives, they don't always know how to show it in a way that lands. That doesn't make them bad husbands, but it does mean there's still room to grow, even after 60. If you're a husband watching this, I hope this doesn't feel like blame. I hope it feels like an invitation to understand the woman who stood beside you all these years a little more deeply. And if you're a wife quietly nodding along to every word, please know you are not being too sensitive. You are not asking for too much. You are simply human, and you deserve connection. That need is valid, and it matters. Because at this stage in life, the most precious things aren't money or material stuff. It's the small, sincere moments of connection, those little things that turn an ordinary day into something warm, meaningful, and worth remembering. If this message resonates with you, drop a number 3 in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and turn on the bell so you don't miss what's coming next.